This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. They say a week's a long time in football, don't they? Certainly feels like it. Gareth Taylor has left Manchester City. Cue cryptic social media posts from players. It's Nick Cushing who's the boomerang, by the way, back at the helm until the end of the season. Liverpool shock Arsenal to reach the semi-finals of the FA Cup. They join City, Chelsea and Manchester United in the last four. Speaking of United, more foot-in-mouth content from Sir Jim to come. All that, plus we'll take your questions. And that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. And what a panel we have today as well. Suzy Wrack, hello. Busy one this week.
Just a bit.
On the phone to Tom Garry last night as the news of Gareth Taylor broke. How are you, Tom?
I'm well, thank you. Lovely to see you. Yeah, it's been a busy 24 hours, but never a dull day in women's football, is there?
Of course there isn't. Never a dull day for Robyn Cowen at the moment either. Starting slightly late today because Solly, gorgeous little Solly, has soiled this morning as we start to record, which is wonderful. It's so good to see you, Robyn. How are you?
Oh, all good. But yeah, never a dull day or night at the moment for me.
24/7.
You know how it is.
I do. Very much. Right, listen, it is only Tuesday and it has been quite the week. I don't even know where to start. We're going to start with Gareth Taylor because that's what happened last night. This email from Jim actually sums up the week and how we were planning on doing the pod as poor producer Soph was just rapidly changing everything. Where do you even begin this week, says Jim. Gareth Taylor's sacking, Liverpool knocking Arsenal out of the cup, the abuse suffered by Taylor Hinds during that game, the introduction of the Champions Cup alongside the Club World Cup, the home nations bidding to host the actual World Cup. I'm expecting the pod to be at least 2 hours long. Good luck. I mean, it's going to be close to that, Jim. I'm not going to lie. We're starting late as well. So this is going to be fun. Look, there was a little bit of surprise last night. We've talked at length on this pod about Gareth Taylor, but the news broke from Manchester City that the club's parted ways with him. He took on the role in 2020. He led them to an FA Cup in 2020, a League Cup in 2022, narrowly missed out on the WSL title last season on goal difference as well. Managing Director Charlotte O'Neill said in a statement, Manchester City prides itself on competing at the top of the WSL and on its outstanding record of qualifying for European competition. Unfortunately, results this season have so far not reached this high standard. With 6 games of the WSL campaign remaining, we believe that a change of management will breathe fresh life into our bid to ensure qualification for the 2025-26 Champions League. I mean, they did this after the FA Cup, which was interesting. Timing, question marks all over it, Suzy. But what did you make of the news? What was your first instinct?
Surprise at the timing. I don't think anyone expected it now. But at the same time, not surprised that it's happened and can't believe it hasn't really happened before this point, to be honest. I mean, City present themselves as a club with big ambitions and with a rich history of battling at the top. But for the last 5 years under Gareth Taylor, 2 cup wins is nowhere near good enough. They've not won the title since Nick Cushing was in charge, their only title. It's just a weird scenario that he's lasted as long as he has. When he was given a new contract last season, I made the point that at that particular moment, it looked like a really good move because they were still in all 4 competitions or 3 competitions. They were doing really, really well in the league. They were really, I think they, lots of people kind of had them as favourites at that point to take a title off Chelsea for the first time. And I urged caution and said it's either going to look like an absolutely genius move to tie him down to a new contract, or they're going to have egg on their faces come May when they walk away with 0 trophies again. And what happened? I think they've underachieved for the quality of the squad and the investment that they've had in it. And that has played out this season as well. It doesn't help that you have so many ex-players sort of leaving and hinting that they weren't particularly happy with the way they felt in the environment and not necessarily saying nice things about the manager almost sort of in their omission of him from sort of their leaving statements. So yeah, like I say, not surprised at all that he's gone. Surprised it's sort of taken this long for people to sort of wake up to him, not necessarily achieving. And I think Man City have almost just rested on their laurels a little bit under the illusion that they are a big club in women's football, when the reality is that the statistics, the trophies all speak differently.
Let's kind of delve into that timing, Tom, because I understand the sentiment of the statement, but they're still fighting on all four fronts. They're unbeaten in the last 6. It comes 5 days before a big cup final, which is going to be the first of 4 games against Chelsea in the space of 12 days. I get the point about the WSL, but it just be honest about it. It's not working out. Why do you have to focus on that specifically when it still feels like, why wouldn't you wait till the end of the season if you've waited this long?
Well, from the conversations that I had last night, this is very much a performance-related decision. The club didn't feel the performances were what they wanted it to be, and I think there is a feeling that there might be a new manager bounce now at this fascinating time in the season. It certainly throws a real cat amongst the pigeons, doesn't it? For these 4 games against Chelsea, they've got to come in. I did find the timing a bit strange, but I think it's there's a few things that are worth bearing in mind about because. Remember, don't forget that in 2022-23 season, when Taylor's Man City finished 4th, a lot of people thought he was probably going to leave that summer, and he got a 1-year extension initially, and then last year signed that new 3-year deal. And I think it's worth keeping in mind that when he got the new 3-year deal, he had a huge ally behind the scenes in Nils Nielsen, who was director of women's football, and he was a huge supporter of Gareth Taylor. He's obviously no longer there. He's not been there since the summer. He's now the head coach of Japan, as we know. But Nils was a big backer of Gareth. And I think it's for any head coach, when there's this change of director of football and when you've got a relatively new managing director in Charlotte O'Neill as well, the new people in charge behind the scenes are going to have their own thoughts and ideas. And I think I did wonder if this might happen in the summer. It's a surprise it's happened now, but City feel that they've got a really safe pair of hands now in Nick Cushing. Cushing's been taking some time out after getting to the playoffs with New York City men. From my understanding is that this is the only job in women's football he would have contemplated coming for because of his emotional attachment to Man City. Other than that, he didn't really want to get back into a job right now, but it's because of that emotional attachment he's got. And City feel that Nick Cushing can come in and give them the best chance of not just winning a trophy, but the best chance of getting into the Champions League. That's what's really hit the button for Man City, is they didn't feel that the performances were going to be enough for the Champions League qualification, and they now think that they've got a better chance of that.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? We'll talk about Gareth Taylor's future potentially. He was ruled out of the job at Angel City at the weekend, but obviously who knows now that that's all changed and if that has anything to do with it. You always end up going to social media, Robyn, don't you, in these circumstances and seeing what some high-profile current and former players have to think about it. And if you remember a recent BBC interview with Ellie Roebuck, former Man City goalkeeper, made it clear she'd been frozen out the team, not been shy on social media in the last 24 hours. The boomerang, I'm like, it's either what goes around comes around or it's Nick Cushing's back. But I think it was I think it's maybe the former. And obviously we know about the high-profile incident with Chloe Kelly. We've spoken about it a lot on the pod as she tried to force a move from the club. Lots of liking of comments, etc., which feels pretty telling.
I think so, yeah. I kind of agree with everything that Suzy said. I believe Manchester City have underperformed massively. One WSL title just isn't good enough. And yeah, I think that the main thing is if Gareth Taylor was getting results and getting trophies, you couldn't really argue with it. But the fact that there clearly is, it seems, I'm inferring there is an issue with his player management, because it seems like there's a pattern here. As you mentioned, Ellie Roebuck, Chloe Kelly. I mean, I remember back to Jill Scott when she was loaned out to Aston Villa in her last season as a professional footballer. And just from, being with pundits, it just seems like he's not a great communicator. And I also feel like that with the media as well. It just doesn't quite come across as, you kind of got to play the game a bit, haven't you? He's not exactly a warm individual. And as I say, if he was getting results, and he was to start with, wasn't he? He got the FA Cup, he got the League Cup, but that was a long time ago. Ellen White pointed out to me that was the last time she was in the team. She scored in that, And now here she is in her second year as a pundit with the BBC, and they're back. But that was the last time they won anything. But I think more importantly, it's the players. A lot of them clearly weren't very happy, and I don't think Nick Cushing's going to come in and sort of start playing a really different way. This seems like a vibes thing to me. They're hoping that he's going to come in, give them a boost, and maybe, they could still potentially, unlikely, but potentially win 3 trophies. They're still in the FA Cup, they're still in the League Cup final, of course, and the Champions League. And I know they said qualifying for the Champions League is priority as well. They're only 1 point behind Arsenal, who seem to be wobbling a little bit. So that's, that's all to play for. So, yeah, interesting timing. But clearly they feel like it's worth the sort of roll of the dice.
Yeah. Let's talk about Nick Cushing, Suzy. Interim basis at the moment, he's returning. How tough a challenge is it going to be with the month that they have ahead, we've all alluded to?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. Obviously, he's not coming into the same club, the same playing group that he left, right? Like, it's different people around, some familiar faces, but not many. Obviously, he's got a huge amount of experience of success in the women's game and, did pretty well in America based on sort of, what we know about how he feels about this role, what Tom said earlier, and what his ambitions are in the men's game. Like, I think you could probably fairly confidently say that it's unlikely that he's going to necessarily go for the job long term, unless, if they walked away with 3 trophies, I'm sure he might reconsider that position. But, he's very liked. I remember doing an interview with Nikita Paris, said he was the best coach she had ever had. And, this was literally in the summer just gone. So, she's had a lot of coaches, like tactically and, clearly kind of really good people manager as well. Like, he was really well liked. So, a change to the feeling around the environment and around the club generally, I think will help. And then, they've got one of the best tacticians the women's game has had. So there is opportunity there, right? Like, it's just how quickly he's able to implement his views. I mean, in theory, the fact that the League Cup final is first, like, it'd be great to win a trophy, right, in your very first game back. But in a certain way, they can sort of just, there's nothing to lose in that game for them. If they lose that game, oh well, it's his first game back. They've just got rid of Taylor. There's a lot of change going on. If they win that game, great. But they learn a hell of a lot from it, and they go straight into a game against the same opposition. And from a tactical point of view, you can't really want for more than that in terms of who you've got in charge.
No.
I hope he's done his homework on Chelsea. That's all I'll say. It's only one team you need to be looking at. So, Suzy, I've just seen you did an interview with Kira Walsh. She said that as well. She was saying that how great he was in instilling confidence in her as well. Yeah,
and that's the thing, right? Is like, that is where you worry and wonder about Gareth Taylor's influence, right? Because they've all been managed by him as well since then. But no, they talk about Cushing and gloss over their period under Gareth, which is like concerning, really. And it's been weird that the club have overlooked that for so long.
Have a listen to this from Graham. He's emailed us on Women's Football Weekly at theguardian.com. Should we put money on Mark Skinner leaving that hot seat before Jim decides to add him to the Manchester United redundancy list? He might be safe, as Jim Ratcliffe probably doesn't know who he is. Seriously, though, will this level of managerial upheaval in the last few weeks bring us much-needed change and usher in an era of more and more female coaches in the WSL? We'll look at Sir Jim Ratcliffe in a minute, Tom, but what do you think of the second part of Graham's point? We have had quite a lot of managerial changes of late.
That's true, and it has, particularly with Laura Kaminsky's departure, it's left the WSL very light on English women's coaches in particular. There's a lot of eyes now on Liverpool, Man City, and Southampton as well, on what direction they're going to go in. And it would be so valuable and important for the health of the ecosystem in the women's game if at least one, if not all of those jobs were to go to women's coaches, and particularly if they could be British women's coaches as well, because there are so many coming through, younger coaches, but there's not particularly in the absence of Emma Hayes, is not really that massive, big figurehead of the, if you can see it, you can be it type influence. And I hope that changes now. And I think, there's a lot of, it's too early to say where Man City will go with the recruitment. They're going to go through quite a long, thorough process. I'm not at this moment. I'm not expecting Nick Cushing to go for the job. Our understanding is that his long-term ambitions is to try and go back to the men's game. He feels he's got unfinished business there, having got to the playoffs in America. So I don't. My gut feeling is he probably won't be in the running. What we do know is that Amber Whiteley's put her hat into the running for Liverpool and made a great start. So let's see what happens there. But I hope, I think we'll all echo that sentiment that we want to see more women's coaches in leading the game.
Let's focus on Manchester United then. The city's been busy, for sure. Sir Jim Ratcliffe sat down for an interview with Dan Rowan for BBC Sport the other day. It was released on Monday, and he continued to make some eyebrow-raising comments about the women's team and where it stands within the club. Regarding the criticism that's come his way for previous comments where he described the men's side as the main issue and the women's as an opportunity, he thinks that was a bit unfair. He said, "What I said at the beginning was my main focus is on the men's team because at the end of the day, that is what moves the needle at Manchester United." He then went on to cite the difference in revenue that the two bring in. I think he said something like 640 million for the men and 10 million for the women. And he said, "With my business background, you tend to focus on the bigger issues before you focus on the smaller issues. But the women's team wear the Manchester United brand," he said, "the Manchester United logo. So in that sense, they're every bit as important as the men's team. And frankly, they're doing better than the men's team." He said, "I think they're second in the league." Yes, they are, Jim, thank you. "And won the FA Cup last season. Mark Skinner's doing a great job as the coach. And the new captain, Maya Letitia, I think he called her Maya, is doing a great job." He said he didn't want to respond to reports that he asked former captain Katie Zellam what she did at the club, but that he did ask Maya if she was related to Matt Letitia, but the answer was no. I mean, look, we might insert some of our off-recording comments here. I'll let producer Silas decide on that because we had a good old chat about this before we actually started recording. But let's do some proper on-the-record comments for now, shall we? Which would be exactly the same. And Robyn's face just tells a picture. So actually, I think I'm going to go to Robyn first.
Well, I'll say what I said off air is most of us have a sort of a filter and a public sort of what we really think. We kind of keep either in our heads or in our private lives. But he seems to really not care that the PR own goals affecting not just the women's team, but the men's teams we've seen. But it's so damaging. And I really feel awful for the players, for Mark Skinner as well, and just for the whole setup, and particularly the women's setup, who are striving to do something special with this team. And then they must just despair every time they hear more comments. And I do feel like on the pitch, they're doing actually really well, like under the radar, really well this season, Manchester United. But we are very despondent, aren't we, about them because of all this? And it's not just Jim Ratcliffe, because this has been going on before him. We can trace this all the way back to Casey Stoney leaving and talking about the conditions, etc. So it's not just him, but he is making this 100 times worse just give us, for once, just give us some platitudes. I don't, fine, just give us something. You don't have to believe it. Just say, the women's team are valuable, blah, 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 even if you don't think that. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just not helping anyone.
Tom?
I just find it such a missed opportunity for Sir Jim and Ineos. Even when he's trying to be positive about it, he still lets it slip with the calling them, smaller things, and just the tone of it, and alluding to thinking that they were in second. And what a missed opportunity it was to really be more aware of the fact they got the best defensive record in the league, or praise some of the individual players, or praise, mention the fact that they won. He's never been to a game at Leigh Sports Village, and I think that speaks volumes. And we talk about him more broadly as the Man United owner. We should refer to him as the owner of Manchester United's women's team. That is from a women's football perspective, that is what he is. And if you look at it from that lens, he's a terrible owner because he pays no attention whatsoever. And I, thinking more broadly here, I'm going to make a prediction here that in maybe 10 years' time, we'll look back on this and Sir Jim Ratcliffe will have been one of the triggers for a big turning point. And I think we could see a movement over the next decade where more and more women's teams are women's arm of the club is like sold off.
Yes, I was
privately.
thinking exactly that. That.
Not necessarily Manchester United, but I do think we'll see a lot of that. And the more and more that happens, I think we're going to see the players and the fans craving that more and more. An owner of their women's club where they are the full 100% focus. And I think as we start to see that, the domino of that happening over the next few years, I think that's going to be absolutely fascinating. And I suspect players, particularly players, are going to want to play for the clubs that have an owner who is invested in their women's side night and day, living and breathing it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. Right, that's it for part one. In part two, we'll look at the rest of the FA Cup action and discuss the news of a home nation's bid for a World Cup. Welcome back to part two of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. So let's focus on the football, shall we? The quarterfinals of the Adobe Women's FA Cup returned on Sunday. 8 teams were whittled down to 4, and the upset of the round came at Meadow Park as a dogged Liverpool knocked Arsenal out of the competition. It finished Arsenal 0, Liverpool 1, thanks to a slightly unfortunate own goal from goalkeeper Daphne von Dompsalaar. It was a mixture of both Liverpool's game plan being spot on and Arsenal maybe not being at the races. It was back-to-back wins for interim manager Amber Whiteley. Here's what she had to say. I don't know if I've got the words, to be honest. I'm just so proud of everyone. I thought we were so well organised. The work rate was absolutely incredible and we limited their chances and put them under pressure in front of their own goal. What a start for her. First 2 games in charge, Robyn, couldn't have gone much better. It's the first time they've actually reached the semi-finals since 2016, 2017. What has she done to kind of come in and steady the ship in what's been a little bit of a turbulent time for them?
Yeah, I don't think an awful lot, but clearly she does have her own ideas. And I do like the fact that she has come out and said, I want the job, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. I do like that. So she's been quick to praise Matt Beard and his contribution. It just seems like they're a bit more, just the last 2 games, they've only scored, it was 2 1-0 wins. They just seem a bit more progressive going forward and a bit braver maybe. But as you said, the game plan against Arsenal was brilliant. Arsenal weren't at their best, of course, but it just seemed like they really kept them at arm's length. 1 shot on target for Arsenal the whole game. So that suggests a really well executed game plan. And yeah, this is great. It's their first semi-final in 8 years. It is nice that we don't have, because I predicted, I think we all thought all the home sides were going to win. It was going to be another Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, Man United semi-final. So that's good. And she's really put herself in the shop window. And if they win the next round, of course, they've got Chelsea away. Gosh, I mean they really have no choice but to give her the job. The only thing I say from an Arsenal perspective is that I saw a lot of complaints about the pitch, which I don't think is, I'm sure they're valid, but I don't know. Arsenal seem to have a thing about, Mikel Arteta talking about the ball, things like that. I'm just not sure it should be. I don't think it was the club, actually. I just saw supporters saying the pitch wasn't great. And I don't know about you, Faye. I don't really like those that sort of discourse particularly.
I don't either. Stop making excuses. Just play better. Win the game. Let's focus on Arsenal, Suzy. No shots on target. I mean, there you go. That's got nothing to do with the pitch. No shots on target until the 65th minute. Renee Slagers didn't impact the game, really. I mean, this stat is really damning, actually. No FA Cup for Arsenal in 9 years, having won it 14 times prior to that. Their last league title came in 2018-2019. Bearing in mind your club's history, Suzy, 2 trophies since then is not a particularly good return. How do they need to compete and what do they need to do to try and compete?
It's not a good return. I mean, exactly the same that I was saying about Man City and Gareth Taylor earlier, in terms of what we should be expecting, applies here as well, right? Like, at least they've had some managerial turnover to try and rectify that to a certain extent. But like, we've just been talking about Amber Whiteley. Like, if you look at that scenario, like, maybe Arsenal is perhaps a cautionary tale for not getting too hyped up about a interim manager having a good start to things, because I don't want to say that the shine has sort of come off Renee Slager's a little bit, but I have noticed some fan discontent there about, kind of the way Arsenal are playing at the moment and their lack of goals and creativity, which, like, is a legacy problem, right? Like, it was the same under Jonas Eidevall, and they still ultimately operate the same way. Clearly benefited from a new manager bounce. We were very concerned about the period coming into the new year at the end of January with Chelsea and City back to back, which wasn't a wholly satisfying set of games for the club. Obviously, going out of the cup competitions, huge blows. So, like, we need to be less maybe quick to jump on this manager is really, really great when there is a very, very natural new manager bounce that we see every single time, men's and women's football, right? Am I saying that Renee Slager shouldn't have been given the job? No, not at all. Like, I think she should have been. I think it was the right move. I don't think there's a huge number of like top quality managers in the women's game that are available or even exist. So, already it's slim pickings, and she's done a great job to this point. And I think she deserves backing and a chance to create a team that is more in her image. I think they need to do a little bit more shopping in the summer transfer window, and a little bit of a squad rehaul wouldn't go amiss. But yeah, like, they need to start finding the creative edge to match the like dominance in possession and things like that, because you just can't be losing games like that with such lackluster displays for a team of their quality. And in the same way that City can't rest on their one WSL title as, an implication that they are a big team, Arsenal cannot rest on its 30 plus titles in history. When we're talking about, the last league win coming in 2019, and, that even then was sort of in isolation from their one prior to that, and going back further and further and further, like that, history doesn't sustain you. And, you've got to find new ways to win. And, this was a year in which Chelsea were undergoing major change and no one has challenged them. And that is a massive indictment of every other team in the league. But yeah.
We'll chat Chelsea shortly. I do just want to talk about an incident in the second half, though, Tom. Taylor Hinds was on the receiving end of sexually inappropriate comments from a spectator, and the game had to be temporarily paused as a result while stewards escorted him from the ground. Both clubs and Taylor released statements on Monday night. The Liverpool captain says she's determined to make a stand. These incidents seem to be becoming more common, Tom, which is a worry.
Yeah, very depressingly, this is not an isolated incident, and we don't want this to creep into the women's game, and sadly it already has. A massive respect to Taylor Hinds for the way she's called this out, and actually, as Hinds and Liverpool have said, kudos to Arsenal for how swiftly they dealt with the individual in removing them from the stadium. I know an investigation's ongoing more widely, but I think Hinds and Liverpool are grateful for how swiftly the Arsenal staff there took action on the day. But look, no player should have to be putting up with this. We're not going to discuss the exact comment that was used. I don't think that's the right thing to do to get that oxygen, but certainly it's not something that anybody in any walk of life deserves to have shouted at them, let alone at football, are just doing their job there. So no respect to her, and but I hope that we don't see this keeping in more and more, because we don't want this in the terraces in the sport.
Nope, we most certainly do not. So Arsenal are out, Liverpool are through. Across London, Arsenal's close neighbours seem to have no such problem winning by whatever means necessary. Sonia Bonpastor's side progressed to the semi-finals for the 4th straight year thanks to a narrow win over Crystal Palace. It finished Chelsea 1, Crystal Palace 0 thanks to a fine finish from Lauren James. And the quadruple is still alive for Chelsea, Robyn. I feel like we talk about this every year.
Yeah, every year. And yeah, it's going to be talked about up until, of course, this weekend, where maybe it might be, or maybe it will be. Well, I don't know what to say. But yeah, I mean, they clearly should have won by more. 59% possession, 21 shots to Palace's 2. And I mean, Palace didn't have their Chelsea loanees, Lexi Potter and Anique Nowen. So, they were always going to be up against it. Just pretty profligate in front of goal. But Lauren James is in fantastic form. Another lovely clean strike from her, and they're through. It's like just in juxtaposition to Arsenal. Chelsea, I feel like I've seen them play not very well a lot, and yet they win. And we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? Whereas if teams like Arsenal, Man City, etc., they don't play well, they're in danger of not winning, even no matter who the opposition is, and that's the difference, isn't it? That's the difference. And as for as for Crystal Palace, I mean, they've changed the manager. This was clearly going to be a very difficult one. They've got Villa, Everton next, so I guess we'll see then if the change was worth it.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. We'll talk about Leif Smarud in a second, but just as an example, with some stats of Chelsea's poor performance, they were wasteful, and that is something that I'm sure Sonia Bonpastor will start to be concerned about. 21 shots they created, but just 5 of them on target. Stats don't lie and things like that. They've got to be a little bit more clinical, but it was a really good defensive display, to be fair, from Crystal Palace. And when you look back at the last time these two sides met, when they were hammered 7-0, you have to say that there's progress. What will he take from it, Leif Smarud, Suzy, going into those 2 big games?
Again, I repeat what I said in the when we're talking about Arsenal and Liverpool, in that, fear the new manager bounce in setting expectations really high, but obviously that is a hugely impressive defensive performance. That said, Chelsea haven't looked amazing of late. Like as Robyn said, they're winning ugly a lot of the time. They're getting the results despite performances not necessarily matching up with them. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do in this run of fixtures against City, where the games are more open, where they're going to be tested more. So there's loads of positives that Palace can take from that performance, obviously. Not having the ball go past you 7 times as a goalkeeper for one is going to be a much better experience and give you a little bit more belief. But I just am wary of sort of expecting them to go on such an amazing run and avoid relegation and blah blah, just because of this one performance against a slightly misfiring Chelsea side, and with a new manager bouncing in swing, just caution. I just urge caution everywhere, because there's a lot of heart to be taken from it, but there was a lot wrong with Chelsea in that game, and a valiant performance from Palace, but not necessarily sustainable. And I would like to see them find some sustainability and consistency.
Yeah, we've touched on Manchester City already, but we haven't fully focused on their quarter-final. It was a pretty comfortable 2-0 win over Aston Villa. Bunny Shaw and Jess Park on the score sheet. And, City had dropped more league points in midweek. So this kind of victory, Tom, felt like it would help to give the players a bit more confidence in what's a really important month for them.
Well, yeah, they for all the fact they've just had a change of manager and they've lost 4 league games over the last couple of months, they still could have a hugely successful season, theoretically. They're still fighting for 3 cups, potentially. Look, they could have won this game by more, couldn't they? They were a little bit wasteful in the first half, completely deserved the win. And I think they will fancy the chances with the home semi-final in the draw. Hey, listen, I know we've already talked about Gareth Taylor, haven't we? But let's not forget, this is a team that missed out on the title on goal difference last season. So through November 2023 to November 2024, they They played 23 league games. They won 21 of them and lost only once. I know seasons don't work like that, but that's more than a league season's worth. That's a title winning year. So they're good enough to win things, and let's not count them out. Let's just wait. I'm fascinated by now how they're going to get on for the rest of the season. I think they are a real enigma now for the next few weeks, and I'm totally fascinated by how they're going to get on over this quartet of games against Chelsea.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Robyn, few eyebrows raised at Natalie Arroyo's decision. I always call her Natalie because it just sounds better than Natalia. Natalia Arroyo is a pain to say. Robyn, there were a few eyebrows raised at Natalia Arroyo's decision to leave Rachel Daly and Jordan Nobbs on the bench. Her team very much set up to defend and hit the opposition on the counter-attack. What did you make of her plan?
Well, Ebony Salmon had a really good chance, didn't she? Yamashita pulled off a good save. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a kind of tub thumping, you shouldn't ever drop our England's roses. I do think dropping Rachel Daly is a bit of a mistake. She's so quality. She's great. She can. There's so much to her game. I do understand the need to change things up because things haven't gone very well since she came in. Did her first game against Chelsea and they lost 1-0. Of course they did. But they played really well. She's only had one win, and that was in the FA Cup against Brighton. She's had WSL defeats, that 1-0 defeat to Chelsea, 3-0 to Leicester, 2-0 against Everton. Clearly they're finding it hard to score. But I do think dropping Daly is not really going to help that. I mean, just tough times, and it's actually made me really sad for Villa because after they had that fantastic season under Carla Ward, they couldn't back that up with her, and yeah, they just seem a bit listless at the moment, having it's the third coach in charge this season. Just really hope they find some stability at some point.
Yeah. Manchester United pretty stable at the moment on the field. Secured progress once again. Comfortable victory over Sunderland. It finished Manchester United 3, Sunderland 1, thanks to goals from Leah Galton, Maya Le Tissier and Ella Toone. Louise Griffiths scored the consolation for the visitors. And it was another dominant performance actually from United, Suzy. They're in such an impressive run of form. Unbeaten in 2025. What's that down to?
They are, and me and Tom were actually chatting about this last night. One of the things that we're a little bit concerned about is the lack of rotation, in that that could really cost them as the games start to pile up. Obviously, in cup competition, in the FA Cup and in the league, they've got that really intense run of 3 games at the end of the season against Arsenal, Chelsea, and City, and if you're, one injury to one of those starting 11 that have started pretty much every game, and you're in trouble because you've not really properly blooded any of your sort of more fringe squad players. So that is the concern for me, is that whether it's sustainable to stick with your starting 11 across the course of the season is a really, really tough ask, and a little bit of an unknown. Is it doable? I mean, sure, why not? But you're banking on a lot of luck going your way as well in terms of injuries and loading and things like that. That is slightly worrying for me. So a hugely impressive form, but yeah, that lack of squad rotation I think could bite them in the arse at some point.
Yeah. So the draw for the semi-finals has been made. Manchester derby with Manchester City hosting Manchester United, and Liverpool travel to Chelsea, with both those games taking place on the weekend of the 12th and 13th of April. I just want to make a nod to the touching tributes actually across the sport at the weekend in honour of 10-year-old Poppy Atkinson, who died after being hit by a car while on a football pitch last week. After Leah Galton's opener against Sunderland, Maya Le Tissier collected a shirt with Poppy's name on it that they then held up to the cameras, while across the games there was also applause on the 10th minute, and just awful news. I can't even imagine what Poppy's family and friends are going through, and our thoughts are with all of them. Right, it was announced after last week's FIFA Council that the home nations were uniting to submit a bid to host the 2035 edition of the Women's World Cup. Bids will be submitted in the final quarter of this year. A decision will be made in 2026. This took everyone a bit by surprise, Tom. I think we did think that the FA were perhaps looking at a World Cup bid at some point, but what did you make of the news?
I think it's a really smart move for everyone I've spoken to since that announcement. Politically, kind of around the world, there's actually a growing feeling that the home nations, have got a great chance of getting this tournament. But strategically, they've not gone up against the USA, who I think most people are assuming a sort of a shoe-in for 2031. I think they played this quite smartly, so still a very long way to go, but I think what a prospect if you're a young player coming through now. The chance of potentially a home tournament in 10 years' time. There'll be a lot of work to be done between now and then, but there is a lot of optimism, I think, and in other countries as well, that this will be a hard bid to beat.
It will be a hard bid to beat. We also don't know if anybody else is planning on bidding yet either. You were the voice of Euro 2022, Robyn. I still love listening to all the highlights, your commentary on it. How excited are you at the prospect of the UK hosting the biggest tournament in the game?
Oh, so excited. And yeah, I mean, obviously circumstances will have moved on by then, but logistically, with kids, that's going to be a lot easier. But yeah, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like then. But no, it's going to be amazing. And again, hopefully by then we've moved forward a bit, a lot with the women's game. But as we saw the impact that had here last time, and it was just a joyous summer, wasn't it? And hopefully you can have that again, and not just in England, but across all the home nations.
Did anyone else do the math on how old they'll be in 2035?
No, thank you.
Okay, so yes, potentially the World Cup could be coming, but also FIFA have announced a 16-team Women's Club World Cup, which was originally meant for next year, and we discussed on the pod. It's now going to launch in 2028. And run every 4 years. We'll maybe talk about our thoughts of Club World Cups another time. They're also going to start an annual 6-team Women's Champions Cup from next year, which will involve the winner of every confederation. Finally, with the NWSL season about to kick off, this weekend saw the 2025 edition of the Challenge Cup. Washington Spirit lifted their first silverware of the season with a 4-2 penalty win over Orlando Pride. The match had finished 1-1 at full time. Right, it's been an absolute pleasure. We have got through so much today. I actually cannot believe that. It's not quite 2 hours as Jim predicted, but probably not too far off. Robyn, it was lovely to see you. Lovely to see Solly. He's been so well behaved the whole pod. What an absolute peach.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my little mascot's been very good. Easy when they're not mobile. So yeah, he'll be here. And then it might be a bit trickier. But yeah, great to be back and to see you legend faces.
We have missed you very much. Tom, it's lovely to see you. I hope you get a quieter week this week. I pray for you.
Thank you so much. We'll be fine. Yeah, it's only the League Cup final and goodness knows what else. Yeah.
Oh my goodness me. Suzy, it's always lovely to see you. And I hope it's slightly quieter for you and your days off are actually days off this week.
Me too. The only question I want to know next time Robyn is on the pod is whether she can stick on her commentary when she's out to get Solly to sleep.
To be honest, I think, as my husband has said, that they hear enough of me. They do not want to hear extra Robyn voice. It's too much. It's too much.
You can never get too much Robyn voice.
Yeah, no such thing.
Exactly.
Very kind.
That's it from us this week. Keep your eyes peeled, though, in your feeds later on in the week for a special interview with Baroness Sue Campbell. Suzy and Sophie sat down with her to discuss her new book and her illustrious career, so enjoy that. Keep having your say by sending in your questions via social media or emailing us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. And as ever, a reminder to sign up for our weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalposts Sign Up. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Silas Gray. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Salah Ahmad.
This is The Guardian.